Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. I think the biggest breaking news today right now is this Signal war chat where basically Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was added to a Signal chat called the Houthi PC Small Group by a user named Michael Waltz. And Michael Waltz is the name of Trump's national security advisor. So everything seems to point to this being legit. The National Security Council has agreed to look into it. But back on March 11th, the Trump security team, the National Security Advisor, the VP, the Defense Secretary, but the Secretary of State, like a bunch of people were in a Signal group chat talking about plans to bomb Yemen and accidentally added in a journalist. And for those who don't know, Signal is a sort of Telegram, WhatsApp style encrypted end-to-end messaging app. Yeah, maybe don't accidentally add in a journalist into your secret war planning chat. Also, maybe don't have a secret war planning chat over. Yeah, it's an end-to-end encryption, but also it's no.
Before we even get to that, let's look at the irony of the name, because PC is not necessarily something you would
They're all
associate
anti-PC.
with those guys, right?
Right. What does PC stand for in this case? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this one does all kinds of. You almost have to take your hat off and put new hats on, where you can look at it as a technologist and you can look at it as somebody who's like pushed the button on a message that they regret sending later. You know, it's hard, but it's the government, so you don't expect them. I don't know. I always have. There's a couple of people in life I have a lot of admiration for: veterans, and you know, the government. You're hoping that these people at the top are thinking about what they're doing, and accidentally adding someone to a chat to talk about bombing another country. It's like they're redrawing the lines on international relations,
Turns
right?
out maybe making the former Fox News morning host the defense secretary was a bad call. Maybe not the guy, right? Like John
Yeah.
McCain was a bloodthirsty war criminal, basically, who wanted to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. But at least I know he wouldn't have done it in a way that puts people at risk. He would have adhered to good security practices. Like it's just a wild series of things, of bad choices from people who probably shouldn't be in this job. Like no one in the Trump admin should be in the jobs that they have, but especially like Republicans do stupid things, but they at least tend to pick like the guy who's been in the industry for 40 years and know what he's doing. I hate the decisions he's making, but at least he knows not to do a freaking WhatsApp group chat.
Yeah, and the problem it's indefensible, right? Like this is why I'm a rhino, because it just you can either defend all of the stupidity, or you're a rhino, right? So I'm a rhino,
Sure.
happy to be a rhino for the next few years. But yeah, it's like I don't want to jump and say and just trivialize it where it's like, yeah, somebody as careless as that, imagine what they're going to do with security. But it's like, it's also like, what kind of culture are you generating at the executive level of the government branches, where you're just sort of shooting the shit and dissing Europe? And I can diss Europe, but it just feels like the kind of stuff you don't ever want to write down, you know? It's
It's
so odd.
it's that meme from The Wire where the guy's like, "Are you taking notes on our criminal enterprise? Like, what are you guys doing?"
Right. Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
the timeline of events is bonkers. So, uh, Jeff Goldberg gets added to this chat on March 11th. They talk about the attack in Yemen that happened on March 15th. They add Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to Russia, for whatever reason, and people have lined up the timelines of when Steve Witkoff got added to the group chat. He was almost certainly physically in the Kremlin when he was added to the group chat on what we don't know was his personal device on Kremlin Wi-Fi. Like we have no idea, but it's an insane. Of course, that's why you don't add people to the frickin' Signal chat.
I just realized you didn't say Jeff Goldblum.
No, I did not. Jeff
I was
Goldblum
racking
would
my
be an
brains.
interesting JG.
Yeah, I was like, well, maybe it's a really common name. I was like, Or
No.
maybe, but that's the world we live in now,
JG.
right?
That's the thing is the guy was like, oh, I just added JG, whoever he thought
Right.
JG was going to be. Why does the National Security Advisor have the ability to add random phone contacts that are not? There's so many things. If you're, this goes back to also just like I don't expect the government to be great about some of this, but I do expect the defense secretary and the national security advisor to have something smarter than his Google contacts Rolodex to find the name of the person to add to the secret war planning chat. Like, what are you talking about?
No.
Why are there not like 5 confirmation codes you need to send out to get included?
Yeah.
You don't go into this if you want to participate in conversations in the uh what's the White House security room called? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name of the White House Situation Room? If you want to get added to the Situation Room and you can't physically be there, they make you go to these special things called skiffs, which are secure rooms that exist in a bunch of places, but you're not allowed to bring your cell phone in there. Like, you would kind of hope that maybe when we're planning to bomb another country, the people involved in that decision chain would not be able to just like dial in from their personal phone. What the hell?
Yeah. The challenge is to, and I've got to assume, looking in from the outside, that, we know people, right? You know, when you're meeting an expert, you know, when like we've met engineers and architects, and they know their stuff inside and out, right? It's like you can sense they grew up inside of that framework. They've been in the old versions, and there's that experience, right? And that's what I feel like this is, which again, to your point, is really scary because fine, put him in charge of fun fairs, right? Put him in charge of theme
It's
parks, but don't not
no,
security, right?
no, it is crazy. The other part of this timeline is that this all happened on March 11th to March 15th, or 16th maybe. On March 18th, the Pentagon sent out a memo warning against using Signal specifically, even for unclassified information. They said, quote, a vulnerability has been identified in the Signal Messenger application. Russian professional hacking groups are employing the linked devices feature to spy on encrypted conversations. It notes that Google has identified Russian hacking groups that are targeting Signal Messenger to spy on persons of interest. They knew that this was a bad vector for these conversations to happen and warned themselves about it and chose not to listen to this. Apparently, the NSA knew about this in February. It didn't make it to a Pentagon memo until the middle of March, but holy crap, guys. There was another part of the memo. Please note, third-party messaging apps, e.g. Signal, are permitted by policy for unclassified accountability recall exercises, but are not approved to process or store non-public unclassified information. So not even just not you're not allowed to use Signal for classified information, of course, but even their internal advice is unclassified information that's not public also shouldn't go into Signal. Every internal security policy was don't do this dumb thing, and yet for some reason, no one in this group of like a dozen people who are all in charge of our national security thought to pause and go, this is a weird conversation to have over this non-official app that we're doing.
Yeah, and for listeners, it's important to understand, right? Like that's the time that puts the emphasis on the safety, right? Like now you've got agents in the field and relationships with other governments, and you're in this window of time now where anything can really happen, right? It's like because yeah, it's I don't even know if defending it is the right term anymore. It's kind of just like a ugh. That's kind of how I feel with these guys. They've rewritten the rule on everything, including logic, right, and sense.
Right.
And now we're just yeah, because no doubt, classic. It will be compared to the other side, right? Like, oh well, these when they were running things, they did this with emails, and it neither's great, but this is by far in my lifetime. When you think about it, there's very few security incidents that you think about, but the fact that these guys are using Signal to talk about bombing countries, it's
Right.
got to be up there in the top three, right? During our lifetime.
I mean, NPR had a bunch of quotes out of it. So The NPR quote was: "An extraordinary breach of U.S. security is stunning security and intelligence veterans." After a journalist was added to the Trump administrative group chat, former Rep. Adam Kinzinger, a Republican who served as a lieutenant colonel in the Air National Guard, said in a, I'm going to call it a tweet because I refuse to call it X, "Any one of us that served in the military or serve in the military would be in Leavenworth if we did this." John Bolton, war criminal John Bolton, former national security advisor during the first Trump administration, told NPR, quote, "These are things that are absolutely basic, yet these are cabinet level people in our government, and yet not one of them ever said, why are we on Signal?" It's like the I'm not. My mouth refuses to form the words John Bolton, the sane Republican. But like, if John
Yeah.
Bolton is telling you you're doing this bad, this is a clown show. This
No, it
is
is.
Trump hiring absolute morons who should not be put in this situation.
Yeah, he's it really is that, right? There's like this sort of filter of a bunch of, like you're saying, they're starting to look more and more normal Republicans because we can be a bit wacky, right? Like we can be a bit,
Yeah.
but they're looking awfully sane now. I mean, these guys are
Right.
making the Tea Party look sane.
Well, so they had Senate hearings today, and Senator Mark Warner was asking Tulsi Gabbard, "Can you confirm you were in these chats? Can you confirm if any of the information was classified or not?" And Tulsi Gabbard's answer was, "It's under review. I'm not going to tell you any of that." But then at one point insisted that nothing in the chat was classified, and so therefore it's not a breach. The White House also said it's not classified and
Share
is
it with
therefore
us.
not a breach.
Uh,
And Mark Warner's answer was, "Great. If it's not classified, then you should be willing to share the text with us right now. Please hand them over. If you're not concerned about this, if this isn't a security breach, then you should publish it." And now a bunch of people are saying, well, if the White House and your director of national intelligence are both testifying and saying not a classified leak, great, then the Atlantic should be able to be comfortable coming forward and saying, great, here's the thread. We took all of the screenshots. Here's everything you should know. To the point that the journalist is being more responsible than the Republicans and the Trump administration. Tim Miller was interviewing Jeffrey Goldberg today and said, there was a covert CIA operative named in the thread, right? And Jeffrey Goldberg replied, yes, and I withheld her name. I didn't put it in the story because she's undercover. But the CIA director listed her name in the Signal chat. So any number of
oh,
just total morons, Kash Patel, like just any number of these people are idiots doing all of this. And you can say a lot of things about Hillary and her emails and if Biden had done this and all of that kind of stuff, but it's all whataboutism. If you
yeah,
think the security of the troops is the most important thing and you think we should have adults managing our national security, you can't possibly look at this and say there's anything other than a bunch of people need to resign or be fired, because this is so wildly out of bounds.
yeah. And the sad thing is, even if somebody was held accountable, let's talk about the worst case scenario. Something happens to the agent, and
Right.
it would be, we fired that guy. They go away, 3 months of news, not even 3 months of news. Then the next unqualified person would come in to step into that role, right? And on and
Right.
on and on and on, right? For the next however many years. Um, but yeah, there's no accountability, right? Like I've sort of said it a few times now for the last few years. The last 10 years has shown how worthless the laws and the Constitution, which everybody swears by the way, like, oh, you don't love it or leave it, man. It's like
Right.
you can't even defend the Constitution anymore, right?
No, there is functionally no law if we can just say that in order to get a job in the federal government you have to swear an oath of loyalty to Trump, not the Constitution. If you're allowed to just ignore court orders and go and
Yeah.
do like
Yep.
Doge going and ripping its way through the government right now is fully illegal. Congress has the power of the purse and has told the executive branch where to spend that money, and Doge is currently breaking the law by not enforcing and fulfilling what Congress has expected of them to do. This entire administration is lawless, serving the God Emperor Trump, who, by the way, there's no evidence that he was even really in the loop about war planning for Yemen. At one point in the text chain, Stephen Miller, possibly SM is the name of the person who makes this comment, quote, As I heard it, the president was clear, green light. So they're taking Stephen Miller, a random, I mean, Stephen Miller is in charge of all of the horrifying immigration bullshit going on right now, but like random guy in the White House is giving the Secretary of Defense I think I heard Trump say that we should do this. That's your chain of command over an unencrypted, or I mean, it's encrypted, but over a possibly
Mhm.
breachable public just every step along the way. Trump doesn't seem to be fully aware of what's going on. Elon's the co-president basically. Your freaking Fox News host defense secretary is chatting with people over a public app about how you're going to bomb an entire country. Just it must be a field day for Russian, Chinese, and any other spy agency out there who knows that they can go and just get whatever information they need. This is the least secure administration. It's America first, it's America last. It is,
Yeah,
there's no scenario in which this is secure.
yeah, it must give our adversaries sort of confidence, right? Because it doesn't take a lot to topple this cow, right? I mean, that's
Right.
essentially it. Like, I wondered that during COVID, like the response around the world would be telltale, right? Which countries could handle it, which came together, which sort of
Right.
rallied, which were producing. America was producing, but we were definitely not united.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, these next few years are going to be so uncertain. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's no sense anymore. It really is just wait it out, right? Like wait it out, and there are
But that's
good
the thing is the
things.
damage and the harm that they cause while we wait it out. Like you have to hope a massive coronary takes out the idiot at the top, but even that's not going to solve this. The Republican Party has fundamentally now decided that the law doesn't matter,
That
and tomorrow President J.D. Vance is going to pursue the exact same strategy.
yeah, that is my worry is that they've changed politics forever, and
Yeah.
this country will be in denial about the value of the Constitution. Where it's like they're literally ignoring everything on it, and they're trampling on your laws.
Right.
So, like, just be done with it, right? Just become a lawless country.
Well, that's the thing is they every step of the way they are not actually interested in addressing the problem, recognizing the problem, even admitting fault. They are fully hoping that they can 1984 their way through. We were always at war with East Asia. Don't worry about it. What we said yesterday doesn't matter to what we do today, to the point that literally within a day, Mike Waltz, the national security advisor who invited Jeffrey Goldberg to the chat incorrectly, went on Fox News today and tried to claim that somehow this evil reporter hacked his way into our group chat. And it's so nefarious that this terrible reporter broke national security by getting himself into this group chat. And it's like, okay, two things. Either this group chat is nothing classified was shared, and it's not a big deal, so why is he a nefarious guy doing anything? And two, if it's so easy for a freaking random journalist to hack his way into your Signal group chat, maybe that's a sign that the Signal group chat was a bad idea. Maybe that's a sign that you are opening yourself up to any number of foreign adversaries doing the same thing. If a journalist at The Atlantic can figure it out, how do you know that this hasn't happened? How do you know that Pete Hegseth hasn't been at a bar and had a Russian agent come flirt with him and hack her way onto his phone? You have no idea that anything is real anymore if your excuse is, oh, a freaking journalist cheated me out of it. How do you think that's a good excuse? And they don't think it's a good excuse. They think it's some bullshit to get the base to say, oh, yeah, you're right. It's an evil journalist. The media sucks. We can move on to the next day. I gotta hope that somebody somewhere has the spine to make sure that this doesn't move on. If this, again, there's no point in talking about if this was Hillary or Biden, but if this was Hillary or Biden, this would be nonstop unending coverage from the New York Times, much less Fox and everyone else.
They gotta be loving it, right? Like the KGB and China,
Right.
whatever agency they have, they gotta be loving it because they gotta have like a different. They gotta have like an appendix, right? And addendums to the original version of how the fuck we spy on America for when Trump and his clowns are in, because it's like, well, yeah, let's just invite them over. They're going to be using Signal while they're in our hotels and while they're on our
Right.
premises. Let's just, because culturally it's organic, right? Like they're obviously an I am texty kind of group from the first 4 years. We know that.
Right.
The challenge is, oh, base is so dumb, and no offense to the
No,
base, but they are so dumb. It does not matter that this guy
no,
did this because they'll be like,
right.
"Oh, what? Look, they're so dumb.
No, it
They don't even
is.
understand what it means."
Well, and the problem is there is no sense of shame anymore. There has not been shame in politics since Trump came down the escalator in 2015 and called all Mexicans rapists. But there is no actual worry about any expectation that they will be held to any kind of standard because one, I don't think they plan on really having Democrats ever be in power again. They're doing everything they can to make sure that they stay in power. And two, even if they did end up losing and Democrats got back in power, they would immediately hold a Democrat accountable for this kind of thing and stir up such a giant shitstorm that you would have no choice but to have the Secretary of Defense resign in disgrace over this kind of thing. So there is no parity. There's no equal balance to this. And I don't like it's a signal to me that they are not worried about ever being held accountable. The reason you have a chat in Signal, by the way, is also secondarily you can't have a freedom of information request to find out what happens. You can't comply with the Presidential Records Act and have this information be retained anywhere. So the fact that they're even in Signal chats on their personal devices is telling me that they're not worried about being held to the Hillary standard of anything because they're not worried that they're ever going to be expected to produce records, to be held to doing things the legal way because they don't expect to be out of power in the future.
I think we need to, and I'm not going to apologize for some of the base because you really are dumb, and I will say maybe it's for me to educate as the conservative, right? Which is what we're talking about is just so you know what Hillary did is nothing like what these guys did, right? Like they
Right.
are having a conversation in a place where our adversaries are most likely concentrating listening because they already know, right? They know these guys
Right.
are texting, Xing, and it there's no comparison. And they
And even if
focus
there was a
so much
comparison,
effort.
that's the thing is, even if there was a comparison, of course you would be outraged if the Biden administration had done this. Of course you would be outraged if the Harris administration was doing this. So the fact that it's just because it's your red team and therefore you're willing to turn a blind eye, like I get it, calling people out on their hypocrisy is pointless these days. Shame is dead, all of that. But like, I am going to still call you guys a hypocrite and
Yeah,
say it's
that's right.
insane that
That's fair.
you're trying to brush this off.
That's fair, especially because
Yeah.
there's so much energy was devoted, like
Right.
shitty T-shirts, and I'm not saying people are dumb because you shouldn't vote Republican. I'm saying things like wearing stupid ass T-shirts about lock her up.
Have a standard that you hold people to and then hold both parties
That's it.
to
The
that standard.
consistency, right? I mean, it's a very
Right.
important thing, human beings, to be consistent. If you wanted somebody else to lose a job and then you lose yours, it's probably not a good idea to go and tell the story on the internet, right?
Right.
But that is my biggest problem with the Republican Party today is it's so it's gluttonous, it's narcissistic, it's
Right.
so
It's tribal.
don't touch my red meat. Ugh. If I want to kill myself from heart disease, that's my choice, and it is. But oh boy, talk about like chopping off your nose to spite your face and being a glutton just to prove you can be. And that's what it feels like in my own party. And I don't see
Right.
a way back during my life because tell me, you got to miss Reagan now, right? You might not have loved him, but
Absolutely not, but
come
sure.
on. Compared to
No.
today, ugh, I take Reagan anytime.
Yeah,
I take
Iran
Bush.
Contra was
I
the
take
exact
Bush.
same. No, we
I
are
take
not
Bush.
whitewashing. We are not whitewashing the horrible Republicans of the last 40 years. But
I might even
um
take Biden, but more for comic relief. Like, oh, he's falling. Oh, but
it is
it's
just
and it won't change. I mean, these behaviors don't change, right? Like maybe who knows,
no,
maybe the
firing Pete
agencies.
Hegseth doesn't do anything. You fire the
No, no,
Secretary of Defense. The
no.
next clown that he puts in charge is going to do the exact same
Yeah,
thing.
and they'll be
Yeah.
good for 3 months. The challenge will be, and I don't think it'll happen because they're canning a bunch of people, right? Like the good thing about the federal government sort of being stagnant was that they'd written all these procedures and policies for hundreds of years, right? Like they'd update them. So there was probably like some good policies around this stuff.
For
But
reasons. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. We
now they're
learned
getting
these
rid of them
lessons.
all. All of that's lost because
Yeah,
that guy worked for 40 years and he was the only dude who knew the policies, right? Like,
right. No, it is insane.
and that's why these policies existed. Everybody, you're like, oh, the federal government is bloated. Yeah. And this is what happens when you
Yeah.
act like an idiot in the federal government is you
Yes.
release
You were
sensitive information.
paying 40 people to help train and monitor and keep the ability to do things securely. You were paying a bunch of people to run the Social Security Administration office so that old people could just call up and have their benefits delivered. You like the federal government should be massive. You want checks and balances. The whole point of all of that is to reduce waste. Medicare is the most efficient healthcare system from an administrative fees perspective in the country because we have a bunch of all of that stuff in place to protect us from fraud and corruption. And it doesn't do a perfect job, but the fact that it didn't do a perfect job wasn't an excuse to cut it out. And yeah, it's just
So let's talk about the was it an attack, a slap, a gentle slap against the Europeans and everybody else in there. What were your thoughts
right.
on that?
JD Vance doesn't want to bail out Europe and help them by doing this. And it's just such a, I mean, JD Vance is a fucking prick anyways and just a whiny little bitch of a man, but you, if you think of the world that way, as we shouldn't take care of a terrorist threat because it also as a side effect makes Europe more secure, which by the way we can have a whole separate conversation about whether or not bombing women and children as a side effect of this actually just creates more terrorists. All we've really done in the Middle East is create more terrorists for 20 years, but cool. But if your opinion is we should or shouldn't do things for national security because we're kind of pissy about Europe, resign. What are you in this job for? It's ridiculous. And to the point that there's that stupid thing that Elon retweeted where it was 4D chess. Trump leaked this as a secret message to Europe that we're only doing this to do you a favor or whatever bullshit brainworm nonsense that they have. Just idiots at every level of this administration.
Well, it's run like it's sort of run like it's almost like a badly run startup, right? Where it's in the corridor where you're like, hey, when we're getting in front of the client and we're doing the demo, you say this and I'll say this, and they're not totally untrue, and then we'll just, and it's just that sleazy sort of,
Mm-hmm.
it's just sleazy. It's like that, yeah. Snake oil. Is that what you guys have? Snake oil
Snake
salesman.
oil salesman,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. It just, I don't know. I'm not pro monarchy or anything, but it just, I don't know. It diminishes you guys even further. Like, I always thought of America as sort of being catching up, becoming more civilized like the UK. But now,
Yeah.
we only left you guys for what, 300 years too? Less, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Less than 300 years. And, whew.
No, we don't. We America has no king, and this
You
Trump
wouldn't take
administration.
you wouldn't take Charles over.
I mean, did you see Trump the other day was like, I don't know if this was real because I can't tell what's real on the internet anymore, but like King Charles wrote a letter to Trump and jokingly or something said like you guys should rejoin the Commonwealth, and then Trump was like, yeah, that sounds like an interesting idea, and I can't tell if that was real or not because Trump is addled-minded, insane dictator weirdo baby. I have no idea if that's real or not, but it would not surprise me.
If you guys rejoin the Commonwealth,
Uh-huh.
you're like you're like below me in
We might as well
society.
just become Canada South at that point.
I'd be like a lord. That's the listeners. I would be a lord. So hey,
No, not quite, but yeah.
that'd be pretty famous if you guys rejoin the company. Yeah, it's.
All right. Anything else that we should talk about on this disaster of an administration?
Yeah,
The
I
other
mean we
thing I'm
should.
curious about is like, is this one of the things that breaks through? Because like a lot of people, just normal, non-political oriented people, don't appreciate the damage that Musk is doing in Doge, and they're going to start to see it when their grandparents' social security check doesn't arrive. But
Mm,
I'm not sure how much stuff is making it through to the normal everyday news, and I wonder if this is one of those ones. I mean, it'll require Democrats to actually have a spine and try to hold people accountable, but this one makes sense. This is Hillary's emails in reverse.
yeah, the challenge with this one is like you might be giving too much credit to other people, right? Like
Yeah.
we, by definition, having a podcast, are talking about the patterns and the fact that we can Sherlock Holmes this shit down to scenarios which are, oh my God, the Russians and the
Right.
Chinese could literally
Right.
disable our network, right? Like, ugh, like we know where it could go, but does the average sort of consumer, like they don't
I
know
mean,
tech, right? They don't think like, wow, this is really bad. Like, it's really bad. I don't think they do. Even
yeah,
intelligent people might not make that connection.
which you would hope the media could help actually educate and illuminate, but that would expect the liberal media is a myth. That is not a thing that is real, and we should not expect that to happen. Democrats have no spine, and I'll be curious. Like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, released a statement saying the Secretary of Defense should resign because this is a actual catastrophe. But who knows if Democrats have the stomach to actually do what you would need to do in this situation, which is not let up on the drumbeat and force the media and others to talk about it. We'll see. It's been 2 days.
You know what else is probably really good is like the previous 72 hours of chat that we'll never get to see because they never invited
Exactly.
somebody like, hey, Big D. Oh, God, can you imagine the ass kissing that goes on in those channels when
Oh, it's
Donald's in
gotta
there?
be just awful. And well, did you see? Was it? I think it might be Mike Waltz. One of the people's responses after the attack went through and they'd killed a bunch of civilians accidentally. His response was three emojis: the fist bump emoji, the American flag, and a fireball. Like fuck you, just the grossest douchebags in
Yeah.
charge of all
I
of
mean,
this. Ugh.
and that's the difference, ladies and gentlemen, between trash and our military, who I just had told somebody tonight, like there are a couple of people in life I just adore, and veterans, you know, do I agree with all of the places they've been sent over the years? Probably not, but I will always have time for veterans. And I think about these people. That's the difference between this clown show and like our top generals and top commanders. Like this, they've trained for decades, like their whole lives. Like from some of them from being kids knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, and it was to protect this country. And we've got a bunch of clowns tearing down hundreds of years, head start on every other country, tech, security, fintech, biomedical. Every single one of those industries is at risk because of these clowns. And my dumbass brothers and sisters in the party can't see that enough to hold them accountable. And I have
Yep.
no doubt in my mind, no matter how bad it gets, these clowns will still have support.
Yeah. And I think I'm concerned that we're at the point that worst case scenario, uh, foreign, and the problem also is you don't need Iran to have access because Iran is a partner with a bunch of other countries who do. You don't need the Houthis, I don't know what the right word pronunciation is there, to have the access to the chat. They are client states of other countries. So three chains of spy agencies talking to one another, and you know that the attack is coming at 2 p.m. and so you do the counterattack at 1:30 and you kill 20 Americans. Those 20 Americans' blood is going to be on these guys' hands, and I'm not convinced we any longer have a state of accountability for that. And
No, no.
maybe that's a thing that could finally break through. You guys actually got Americans killed, but even that I'm not sure is a thing that would actually resonate. The media and the right wing entire ecosystem would somehow rally and protect these guys from that. I don't know. I'd like to be wrong that that could even happen, much less that there would be accountability if it does, but
Mm-mm.
I'm not convinced
No.
these days.
And that's what gets me mad, listeners. I'm not even talking to Kevin with this, like talking to the base of what is left of the Republican Party, but this shit would not happen for us. We would go to prison for much less than
Right.
some of these clowns are doing. And we would
Nope.
spend years, right? Like,
Yep.
and that was the turning point for me is Well, wait a minute. I don't want to live in a country where there's one set of laws. That's a caste system. And it's not even
Right.
like the one I was advocating for online. This is way worse. We skipped the online version and went to these guys untouchable. You guys, like, no
Right.
way, no way,
Yep.
no.
And that's the thing is, no, this system has happened over and over again in history. And if people would just pay attention to history, you would realize that as they have to find more and more people to turn against, that circle of who is acceptable and protected gets smaller, not bigger. It never gets bigger. So the fact that right now you can be a white woman who feels protected by the racist structure in which you exist, eventually it will turn on all women, not just black women and minority women. Like it always gets smaller. So right now, looking at who gets the protection and the benefit of the doubt and the pardons from Trump and all of that, it's never going to expand. It's only ever going to contract. And so you can feel protected now. You can feel like, oh, I'm on the red team, and then it's going to turn out that you're the wrong type of red team at some point. It was
It reminds me of the quote, right? It was the German poem, the journalist. First they came for the socialists,
right,
and
and I said nothing
and
because I
I
wasn't
did
a
nothing because I
socialist.
wasn't a socialist. And that's listeners. That's what Kevin's talking about. Is and I think some of the party were already feeling that they thought somebody else was going to lose their job. They lost their jobs, right? So they came for you, right?
Right. The dude who voted for Trump and then his immigrant wife was deported, and he's so programmed by the red team mentality that he says, I would have still voted for Trump, even though literally his wife has been sent to a country where she's not. She was here when she was 7. Sending a person back to a country when
Well,
any number of these situations where it's purely about the team that you're on, and it's like, okay, how do we break through that?
I'm reading between the lines on this one. Do we
Dude.
come on? I mean, we gotta see. Maybe it was like the 7th anniversary, and he was like, "Oh no,
Dude.
don't clip that out."
Yeah.